Hi, class. Okay, we're going to talk about audience analysis now. And remember, when you are a public speaker, your audience drives the message of your speech. So how do we do that? And there are some ways that we go about doing audience analysis. And we're going to get right into that. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through the PowerPoint about audience analysis. And you get an idea of what I mean by that, like who is your audience and what are they about, and how do we kind of figure out like what an audience thinks or believes or who they are. So let's talk about that. Okay, here we go. So thinking about audience analysis, all speakers tailor their message to their audience. Now, obviously, a politician or the president or someone running for office or someone who's already in office or a council person, they have an idea of mind what they're going to talk about. It's always going to be related to their audience, right? It's going to be if they're going to talk about the need to spend more money on our military or the need for healthcare reform, or they're always going to tailor that message to who they're talking about, who they're talking to. So the conversation that a United States, a president, let's just say a president, kind of conversation the president would have and how they would talk about, he or she, how they would talk about that to people that live in California is maybe different than the people that live in Nebraska. Different concerns, different outlooks, different politics, different cultures, right? So that's what we mean by this. A public speaker tailors a message to their audience. Now we're going to look at first, before we get into actually the people, we're going to look at what we call situational characteristics. And what that means is basically the characteristics, the situation the speaker finds herself or himself in. The size of the audience. Depending on the size of the audience will depend on how much interaction you're actually able to have with the audience. This is a public speech. Obviously, former President Kennedy couldn't have interaction with all this audience, but the audience could all see him. They could interact in some way by clapping or booing or waving their hands or doing something to interact with him. It may not be like eyeball to eyeball, but he could still interact. So the size of the audience, when you're a speaker and you're thinking about how you're going to craft your speech, depending on the size of the audience. When the audience is big, you want to craft your speech with bigger ideas, larger ideas, less details, but larger, more inclusive ideas, right? Ideas that, since you don't know all the details of your audience, you want to talk about things in more of a general way. But stories, you still want to be engaging, and storytelling is always engaging. When your audience is small, however, you're able to bring in more small details, maybe get into details even more, right? At more depth. And when you have a larger audience, you want to have more breadth in the way you talk about something. Okay, maybe that'll help you understand that. Now, your audience that you're speaking to is your class audience, which is a small audience. So details are going to be really important. Time of day. There's a word for time of day. Chronemics, the body clock. When you give your speech, depending on the time of day, right now, think about what time of day do you think would be the best time to engage your audience? It's actually like after breakfast and before lunch is the time of day that most people are most awake and aware and interacting. The worst time of the day to give a speech is in the mid-afternoon, like between 2 and 4 o'clock is really the worst time to give a speech because people are tired. It's after lunch. Our normal body rhythms kind of go down. It starts to come back up at 5 and goes up for a little while, and then it comes down when it's time to go to sleep. And that's the regular body rhythm of a person. Location, where are you giving that speech? Are you giving that speech in a place where you've got 4 walls, you're going to be able to bounce your voice off of something? Or are you giving a speech like outside, right? You're giving a speech where it's going to require you to have a mic or some kind of technological or technical help. Not technological, maybe technological too. You get to decide, here's former President Reagan. He gave a speech with the Statue of Liberty near him, right? Or behind him or to the side of him. And so what a great, it's like giving a speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial or in front of the Vietnam Wall, the Vietnam Memorial Wall. All of those places, location adds symbolism or adds to your speech. So in addition to what you're speaking, there's your environment. So your environment, your location is key. Do you have audience mobility? Can you move around? If it's a large audience, in most cases, you're less likely to move around, right? Because it's a big audience and you can't really control what people are doing. If it's a smaller audience, then you might be able to move around and interact with them. Now, is the audience stationary? Are they sitting or are they mobile? So an audience that's stationary, the burden on the speaker, whether the audience is mobile or stationary, the burden on the speaker is always to be engaging, okay? When the audience is mobile, however, if let's say you're giving a speech like at school and you're in the free speech quad and you're giving a speech so people are moving around and people might stop to hear you speak, the burden on the speaker might really be for you to be more animated and be more physically interesting and use your hands and use gestures, because movement gets our attention, right? Don't do movement just for the sake of movement, but movement using your whole body in the speech will make a difference. You don't need to do that as much if you're giving a speech when people are stationary, because they're listening to the words and you're able to make more eye contact with people. So these are the considerations that you have in public speaking as a speaker. Situational characteristics are audience mobility, size, location, and time of day. Okay, we're going to stop here and we're going to go to part 2 of audience analysis, and I'll be back in a minute.